as I've always said, the real estate business isn't really the real estate business. It's the information business and the relationship business. And we worked really, really hard to have better information than anyone. And when it came to relationships, we worked on not only building relationships with the client, but one aspect of Robert Greenleaf's servant leadership management style is to develop great relationships with the people you work with and to inspire them and motivate them and support them and build their self-esteem. And we focused on that right from the time we hired our first person. And, one of the things I think I'm very proud of the fact that we built such a dominant business. I'm proud of the fact that we sold it for $100 million. But I'm most proud of the fact that today in the New York City investment sales business, there are 29 companies or divisions of companies that are either owned by or run by people who learn the business at Massey Knakal.
Hi, Adam Gower here, founder of GowerCrowd.com and host of the Real Estate Reality Show at youtube.com/GowerCrowd. Thanks so much for joining me today. My guest today is a fellow called Bob Knakal, and he came across my radar. He is the world expert in New York investment sales, and he came across my radar on LinkedIn. So I figured I'd give him a call and see what he could tell us about New York investment sales. Well, as you're going to discover from today's conversation, Bob Knakal is an incredibly charming gentleman with a rich, deep background of success and lessons learned and insights into the human being and how people do business and how they should do business. So we don't really talk very much, if at all, about New York real estate, but we did have a very interesting discussion. You're going to enjoy it very much indeed, from a very successful gentleman in New York City investment sales. Just in case you didn't know what we do here at Gower Crowd, we build platforms, crowdfunding. Well, technically it's not really crowdfunding, but we build crowdfunding platforms for sponsors so they can find more accredited investors and raise more capital. We're very successful at it. Our clients manage over 35 billion of AUM and have raised, I like to say this, I do want to be really careful with making any claims. I know I can point to 300 million of equity that they've raised, but in all likelihood, they've probably raised over 3 times that. Anyway, if you'd like to know more about that, email me, adam@gowercrowd.com. I'd be more than happy to send you some resources and take a look at, see if what we do is up your alley. All right. Well, I am really happy to introduce you to Bob Knakal. It's been a while since he and I have been planning today's recording. You're going to have it's a different kind of podcast today. He's a lovely fellow, and he shares some deep insights into what it takes to be successful in commercial real estate in New York. Some great lessons. Here is Bob Knakal. Bob, what a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for taking some time out. So you are the king of New York. That's what it strikes me as being. From all the stuff
I don't know if that's an official title, Adam.
So what, tell me about your story. I mean, I've seen pictures in black and white of you there standing in front of a building before the Empire State was built. I mean, you've been around a long time.
What's your for a long time? Well, first of all, Adam, thank you so much for having me on, and hello everybody out there. To tell you a little bit about me, kid growing up in a small town in northern New Jersey. Played sports as a kid and still have a group of 7 friends. We all went to kindergarten together and we're still friendly. 2 of those guys are among my very best friends. But we still get together once a year to play poker. Played a lot of sports growing up. Went to 1981, I go to the Wharton School. And shortly after arriving at Wharton, I wanted to be a Wall Street guy like every other Wharton kid. So wanted to get a summer job that would look good on my resume, working for a commercial bank or an investment bank. Was in Hackensack, New Jersey, came out of a Payne Weber office. Across the hall, I see Coldwell Banker, and I think this place is a bank. I drop off their resume. They call me later that day, say, hey, we'd like to interview you tomorrow. I set up the interview. I go to the library to look up this bank the next morning. So I knew a little something about it. I see it's a real estate company. Almost don't go on the interview because who wants to get into real estate? They were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. Took the job, loved it, went back my next 2 summers, started with CB when I graduated from college in 1984, and I've been selling buildings in New York ever since. So as of last week, I sold my 2,329th building, about $22 billion.
Are there any left that you haven't sold?
There are so actually, there's 175,000 investment properties in the 4 boroughs of New York, not including Staten Island. We don't focus on Staten Island. No disrespect to Staten Island, it just operates more like New Jersey than New York. So we don't cover that. But about 175,000 investment properties in those 4 boroughs. So there's a lot more to do. I have a lot more work to do.
Bob, so there you are at Coldwell Banker, and I'm actually flashing back in my own mind to the first time I was exposed to commercial real estate. What was it? What was the hook? What was it that just threw that switch for you in those days when you cast your mind back?
Yeah, Adam, that's a great question. And you know what I think it was is that it was a relatively new office for Coldwell Banker then. And so generally it was a lot of very, very young people. But they dressed nicely, they looked good, they seemed like they were having fun. It was positive energy in the office. They were making a lot of money. I was just a college kid, a summer intern. They treated me like I was just one of the guys. And that office was very social. Every Friday, everybody went across the street to Houlihan's for drinks. And so I got to know these guys fairly well, and a number of them are still good friends of mine. So we've stayed in touch, and it was just an environment where he said, hey, this job seems like fun. I was driving around my first summer, driving around Morris County, New Jersey, writing down information on every commercial building I saw. How big was it? How many stories? How many tenants? Who were the tenants for the company's data bank? And I just thought it was like the coolest thing. And the stories the guys would tell over lunch about the deals they were working on. And I just was fascinated right off the bat. And it seemed like such a cool thing. Again, they're making a lot of money. They're having fun, very collegial. And I think because that office was so great, that was really one of the things that hooked me. And then went back summer number 2. I actually ran that data bank program of summer interns. And then my 3rd summer, I got my New Jersey real estate license, and I was an assistant to an industrial broker showing industrial space to tenants in Morris County. So, I just had a ball. I thought it was the greatest thing. And for whatever reason, when I got out of college, I really wanted to come into the Big Apple. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, they say. So I figured, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. And that was 40 years ago. I haven't left. And, even during the pandemic, when a lot of my colleagues went on to greener pastures to sell properties in Florida and Texas and Tennessee and the areas that a lot of New Yorkers are migrating to, I've stayed in New York. New York is what I know. And, I have no plans to ever slow down.
So you've had these 3 summer internships with Coldwell Banker. You got your license. Then what happened? You progressed to Massey Knakal. How do you pronounce your last name? So Knakal?
Knakal. K is silent.
All right.
So Massey Knakal. So I'll tell you the story. I show up the first day in Manhattan to work at Coldwell Banker. The boss says, hey, Paul Massey just got out of a training program. He just started in sales a couple of weeks ago. Follow him around. He'll show you where the supplies are and the coffee machine and that kind of thing. And at the time, CB had about 40, 50, 60 people leasing office space. about 20 or so in the retail leasing department. And in the building sales group, there were 4 people. There were Paul and 3 other brokers that had about 20 years of experience. And it was pretty clear to Paul and I that the guys with all that experience weren't going to spend a lot of time with us. So day 2 on the job, we said, hey, let's just work together, split everything 50-50 and see how it goes. And that was the start of a 30-year partnership. So 2 years later, we were made the bosses of the group. So those 3 guys with 20 years of experience were working under us. And then we left in November of 1988 to form Massey Knakal. Started with just the 2 of us and a secretary. Grew it 26 years later. It was 250 people in 3 offices in New York. From 2001 to 2014, when we sold, CoStar started tracking the market in 2001. During that period of time, the number 2 firm in town had sold about 1,300 properties. We sold over 4,000. So we lapped the field by more than 3 times. It was great, and it was fun to be a small little popcorn stand in New York and eat the lunch of all the big national and global firms. But we really had a very, very granular approach to the market. We put a broker in each neighborhood, and they were responsible for building a team and getting to know that neighborhood better than anyone. And as I've always said, the real estate business isn't really the real estate business. It's the information business and the relationship business. And we worked really, really hard to have better information than anyone. And when it came to relationships, we worked on not only building relationships with the client, but one aspect of Robert Greenleaf's servant leadership management style is to develop great relationships with the people you work with and to inspire them and motivate them and support them and build their self-esteem. And we focused on that right from the time we hired our first person. And, one of the things I think I'm very proud of the fact that we built such a dominant business. I'm proud of the fact that we sold it for $100 million. But I'm most proud of the fact that today in the New York City investment sales business, there are 29 companies or divisions of companies that are either owned by or run by people who learn the business at Massey Knakal. And that's a legacy that I'm extraordinarily proud of. And I think it really is as much a reflection of what the company was as it is on the fact that, when you are truly a servant leadership, and one thing I'll say, everybody talks about servant leadership, but not many people actually walk it. We walked it, and the proof is in the pudding in those 29 businesses that are being headed by folks who learn the business at our shop.
I got to ask, I've got to segue in before I ask my other question. What is servant leadership?
Servant leadership is basically taking an approach that not that the folks who work for you are there to work for you, but they work at your company, but you're there to work for them. To help people achieve the best they can possibly achieve, do better than they think they can achieve, take the time to train them and nurture them, teach them the business, try to get them to the point where they're developed to the point that they'll do better than you. And building self-esteem is an important part of that equation. A lot of that has to do with giving feedback. Giving positive feedback, not so much negative feedback, but constructive feedback. Surveys have shown that positive feedback is 7 times more effective at changing behavior than negative feedback is. And you build somebody's self-esteem to the point where they feel really good about themselves. They're going to go out and perform better. They're going to do a better job for the client, better job for themselves, produce better. And that is something that just is accretive to everybody.
It's interesting you say that. I always read, I have this sense that you can read the culture of a company by the people who are at the sharp end of customer service. And if they're rude and disrespectful, they're not being treated right, all the way through the organization. But if they're really professional, if they're really trying to help, that says something about the whole organization.
Yeah, and Adam, I think also surveys on job satisfaction show that overwhelmingly the most important thing that resonates on the job satisfaction scale
Mm.
is feeling like what you're doing every day is accretive towards the company achieving its objectives. It's not money. You would think that money is the number one thing. It's not. It's that feeling of being contributing to the objectives of the firm. So, for instance, it wasn't only our top salespeople who, of course, we were patting on the back all the time and telling them what a great job they were doing, but if you went to the folks who stuffed mail in the mailroom and put the postage on all the mail and told them, hey, you know what? We've been noticing you've really been doing an awesome job. And you know what? This is such an important function to get this mail out to people. And back in the before email, we were sending out about 3 million pieces of mail a year. So taking advantage of bulk rates and things like that, it was a lot of work, but these folks did a great job. And I'll tell you, you told them what a great job we were doing and how much pride they took in how hey, if we bundled this way and we brought them to this post office instead of that one, we could save 6 cents a piece. And it changed everything. Even the receptionist told the receptionist, hey, you know what? We've noticed you've been doing such a great job of greeting people when they walk in the front door. And they were just filled with such pride. And a client would walk in the front door and they'd get up, oh, hi, how are
Do it
you?
again.
So great to see you. Can I get you water? Can I get you coffee? Can I get you anything? And they were treated like royalty. And it was all because they knew that they were being observed and appreciated for what they were doing. That's how you get the most out of people.
So
And
sorry,
so many companies just don't do that.
how did you figure that out, Bob? Was this just a natural instinct for you? I mean, New York, real estate sales, you were thinking of being in banking. I mean, it has this idea, you got to be hard and, tough and etc. It
Yeah,
sounds
well,
like a very
Adam,
different approach.
yeah, one of the things that Paul and I always are very interested in is learning about things that matter. And when I say that, I think so much of what students learn in college is wasted. It's not anything you're going to use in your life. And there's so many things that would help people advance things like understanding human behavior, psychology, persuasion, selling, why people do what they do. And Paul and I always used to read these books. Harvey Mackay, Swim with the Sharks, Dale Carnegie, friends, making friends and influencing people, things like that. Bob Cialdini, his books, the head of the psych department at the University of Arizona is probably the leading authority on persuasion in the United States. Bill Urey, the Harvard professor who's written The Power of a Positive No. Richard Schell, one of my Wharton professors, wrote a couple of great books, including The Art of Woo. All of these things, Paul and I were just really into it. I remember we went to a Harvey Mackay seminar once. We thought that was so great, but we always tried to understanding that, and it was funny. Paul and I were always the first two in the office, always. And there were days we'd be sitting there and we'd say to ourselves, what happens if nobody shows up today? We understood that our assets went up and down the elevator every day and night, and that we had to be good to our people. Otherwise, they might not show up. And so I think it kind of all stemmed from that. We wanted to make sure that we were doing the things that we needed to do to keep our folks happy. And I'll tell you, a hiring practice was a big part of this also, in that we told our HR people, look, there are certain things we want you to look for that we think are indicative of a high probability of success in the business. Participation in team sports, because our business is very competitive and you have to work with other people collaboratively. Excellence in some type of competitive environment. Were you the editor of the school newspaper? Were you captain of the debating team? Something like that. Did you go to a good school? The things that, are obvious check the box things, but we always told HR, after you've interviewed somebody, if you don't feel like you would really enjoy going to have lunch with them or going to have a beer with them, you can't offer them a job. And that, I think, was the key to the culture that we built, and the camaraderie that was created, and the fact that, one of our employees would get married and there'd be dozens of people from the company there, or the fact that 20 guys would get a beach house in the Hamptons together for the summer, or the 3 or 4 couples would go on vacation to the Caribbean together. That came out of that approach. But we also, for our company events, and we had a lot of them, we had a bowling night, and we had, a summer picnic, and we had a holiday party. Spouses and children were always invited. And, even to our picnic, you could bring your pets. We had, a dozen dogs that came to the summer picnic. But it was great. And, we made a point to make sure. I remember, going to events, looking at flashcards with everybody's wife's name or husband's name, and what are the kids' names and how old are the kids, because that makes such a difference to people. You have a salesperson come in, and their wife shows up, and hey, Betty, how are you? So great to see you. And all of a sudden, maybe that broker's having a little bit of a tough time and thinking, well, gee, maybe I should get out of the business, or maybe I should go try working at another firm. And Betty would say, oh no, those are good guys. Stay with those guys. Those are good guys, So, we tried to look at it really as a small family business, even as we got a little bit larger.
So let's drill down on this idea. I mean, I've got a whole list of questions about real estate, but this is a really interesting topic to discuss. The world has changed dramatically. You're not sending millions of letters a year. Everything's become digital. Relationships are now developed online, on social media, on Zoom calls, etc. How have you seen the world change? And how does social media and this kind of remote type of communication affect your life, and how you see it affects the way people do interact?
Yeah, Adam, I think that's a great question. And I will tell you that, having been in the business 40 years, when I started in 1984, had no computer on my desk. We didn't have a fax machine, and I didn't have a cell phone. And so the world has changed very dramatically over the last 40 years. But I think that with AI, the world is going to change to an even greater extent over the next 5 years. It's going to be a completely different thing. I was very slow to pick up technology. I was one of the last people with a computer on my desk. It took me a long, long time to get rid of the BlackBerry. It took me a long time to get rid of the flip phone. But now I am all over AI, using it in a big way, hiring folks that know a lot about AI, and I think it is going to change the world. That being said, I also am extraordinarily analog. And if you look at, a lot's been made about my Knakal map room. That's about as analog as it gets. But that helps me understand the market. It's sensory overload when people come into the map room to look at it. I haven't digitized the map intentionally. But analog stuff still resonates. And I think that I'm getting back to doing a lot more hard mail again, because it has a quicker shelf life. I think that we're also inundated with so many emails that sometimes you just get overwhelmed and say, oh, I have to empty my box out. And you just keep hitting the delete button over and over again. You might inadvertently delete something that you should have seen. But, generally people don't get that much hard mail anymore. So, hard mail has a little bit more shelf life to it, and so I'm doing more hard mail again now.
For example, what kinds of, when you say hard mail, it's sort of USPS, you're actually writing a letter on paper? And
well, it's not really letter writing so much as it is sending a postcard or information about a transaction you just closed, or a market report, or my baseball business card. I just sent out 20,000 of those. You have to think of some way to stand out, to differentiate yourself. And you can differentiate yourself in a number of ways: by specialization, by the market information that you produce, by the different things that you send out, the way you conduct yourself. But there are in just about every market, there are at least hundreds, if not thousands, of people trying to do what we're all doing. You have to step out apart from the crowd, and so using some of these strategies and tactics help you do that.
Now, you are quite prolific on social media. I see you on LinkedIn primarily. And tell me about that and how when we were chatting before we started, you said, yes, you get to know somebody on social media. And when you meet them in real life, it's like you already know them. So just what is your relationship to social media, and which channels do you like the most and use the most?
Sure. Well, I have to say, again, a very slow adopter of social media. Um, I essentially was not active on social media until January of 2023. And people ask me why I got on it. And truthfully, because I succumbed to peer pressure. A lot of people were telling me, Bob, you have to get on social media. It's so great. And, you have great stories to tell. You should be out there. And so finally I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. Let me try it for 3 months, see how it goes. And it's just been such a great experience. The relationships that I've built, the opportunities that I've been exposed to have been remarkable. I think it's a fantastic thing. I've gotten great traction, and I think it is something where, I just met a guy in person who I was on his podcast about 8 or 9 months ago. We've been communicating online, and I met him for the first time. And you know what? I felt like he was an old friend. Really remarkable what the medium can do. And so, I've been thrilled with it. I love LinkedIn and Twitter. And interestingly, I write all my content on the weekend. And I send it out to my social media manager, Mo Regalato, and she does all the posting and editing film clips and things like that, which I don't have time to do. And I post the same thing everywhere. I post it LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know, I'm probably missing a couple, but it's the same content. But interestingly, if you did a Venn diagram of where people are on social media, remarkably, the overlap is very, very small. Because people generally, they pick one and they do that one thing a lot. And so if I post something on every platform, one will go this way and one will go this way and one will go that way, depending on the questions or comments people have. The conversation takes a completely different spin. And I think it's interesting. You kind of get a sense for which platforms are much more, let's get down to business, and which are a little more touchy-feely. So it's a very, very interesting, but it's a spectacular way to increase your market presence. I've quoted a number of times. I've said that in the real estate business, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And what a great way to become known than being on social media where thousands of eyeballs can look at you within a few minutes.
Fascinating. Now, you mentioned, again, before we started talking, actually on the podcast, you mentioned a very introspective period after you sold Massey Knakal in 2014. So what was all that about? You sell out, it's a big win. You could have bought a small island, somewhere and just kind of gone to whatever pasture. But so what happened then?
It was a time where I really sat down and I could take a deep breath. And the MK journey, it wasn't all roses. We almost went bankrupt 3 times. I've told the story a number of times where the company existed on credit cards for about 3 or 4 years during the S&L crisis. I personally lived on credit cards for 10 years from 1988 to 1998, where my net worth fluctuated between 0 and minus 180,000 because I had 180,000 in aggregate credit card balances. And so I bounced around in that negative territory for 10 years. So when we sold the firm, it clearly, it was a life-changing thing, but it gave me the opportunity to sit back and say, okay, well, what do you really want to do now? I love the Cayman Islands. 7 Mile Beach is one of the most beautiful places in the world. Do I want to just go sit on the beach for the rest of my life? Do I want to sell buildings? Do I want to buy buildings? Do I want to be a developer? And what I came around to was, hey, you know what? I really, truly love being a broker and selling buildings, and I'm just going to keep doing it. And, I truly, truly love the business, and have no plans to ever retire.
Any anecdotes from your store, from your life selling investment properties, that really stand out from your career in New York as kind of pivotal transactions or events or things that you've seen?
No, I think in terms of inflection point, let's talk about it in terms of inflection points, because I think those are interesting things. So, inflection point number one, it's 1990. S&L crisis is upon us. We have $15,000 in the bank. Our burn rate was 15,000 a month. We had no deals under contract. What do we do? Do we close the doors? Do we, pay 5,000 a month in bills to keep the lights on for 3 months? Do we pay all the bills and see what happens? Do we go to Atlantic City and put it all on black, which we did actually think about for a few seconds? But we figured out, hey, we have good credit, and we're like, look, we have nothing to lose. We're young. We don't have big families. Well, let's just go all in. Let's go borrow every nickel we can. We didn't have any family we could go to and borrow money from, so we had to, go get a $2,000 credit card at this bank and a $4,000 credit card at that bank. And in aggregate, we got 60,000 in credit cards, which was 4 months of carry. So that inflection point, we said, you know what? We're going to stay the course. We believe in ourselves. We believe in this business. We believe what we're doing is good. And, let's just keep at it. We had a geographic approach to the business, with respect to how we organize the business. And so we had another inflection point when we started in Manhattan. We filled up all the geographic areas in Manhattan. So we're like, okay, what do we do now? Do we start leasing offices? Do we rent stores? Do we get into doing mortgage brokerage? And we said, you know what? We don't know anything about those other businesses. Let's go open up an office in Queens. And then we opened up an office in Brooklyn, and this was in 1999 and 2000, respectively, when most Manhattan brokers thought, oh, if I go across the river to the outer boroughs, my shoes will get dirty. I'm not going to go out there. And we were out there way ahead of the curve before it was cool to be in the outer boroughs, which is very cool to be in the outer boroughs now. So in that inflection point, we said, you know what? Let's just keep doing what we do best. Let's keep selling buildings. And then we had another inflection point when we had filled up all the sale territories in the 4 boroughs. And we thought about maybe going to Boston or Philly or Chicago. And at that point, if we had done the same type of thing we did when the Manhattan territories were filled, we would have opened up in Chicago. But what we said at that point, we said, you know what? If we go to Chicago, we're going to have to explain who we are and what we can do. We have decades-long relationships with people in New York. Let's offer them more services. And, let's get into mortgage brokerage. And, that was a great step. But at each of these crossroads, you have to make decisions. And, probably one of the biggest counterintuitive decisions we ever made was after 9/11. You think about what it was like, very late 90s, early 2000s. We had just come through the Russian credit crisis. The dot-com bubble had burst. The United States is in a recession. 9/11 happens. And most companies were laying people off, downsizing. All kinds of really great quality people were out of work. They were brokers, bankers, lawyers, accountants. And Paul and I said, you know what? New York is tough. We're going to bounce back. Let's go up to that point. We were each interviewing all the candidates ourselves. We said, let's go hire a director of HR and hire all these people. And so we started just the three of us in 1988. By 2001, we had 21 people. In the next 2 years, we added 130 people. So we were 150 people 2 years later. That could have sank us, because if the market didn't come back, we would have been dead. But again, went all in. And sure enough, by 2004, the market is roaring back. And we already had boots on the ground all over the outer boroughs. 2004, 5, 6, 7, unbelievably great years in New York. And so we had an unbelievable 4-year run. Those are the big inflection points and the big decisions that we made that fortunately, in retrospect, turned out to be pretty good calls.
Let me dovetail now into 3 final sign-off questions, if I may. So what has been what would you say has been the hardest lesson you've learned then? You've described kind of triumphs over hard times. What have been the hardest lessons that you've learned?
I think the hardest lesson was, well, I don't know if we could say the hardest lesson, but one of the big lessons was, early on, we just didn't ask people for help. And consequently did a lot of things by trial and error, and because of that made hundreds and hundreds of mistakes that wasted a lot of time. We could have saved a lot of time by simply going to people and asking them. Later on in 2004 or 5, I think we formed an advisory board, all very senior people in different real estate industry and related industries that helped us tremendously. But that was a big takeaway from it. And, just also to, I think to always have a long-term perspective. Don't do things for the short term, do things for the long run. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And, people always say, well, hey, I have this situation on the deal. The seller wants this, the buyer wants this. We always exclusively represented the seller. And we'd say, look, just if your mom owned the building, what would you tell her? If your dad owned the building, what would you tell him? And if you treat your clients like they're your family, you generally make the right decision and give the right advice. So that was something that we came to learn also, is that decision making gets really easy in terms of knowing what to do if you treat the people that you work with and the people that you work for like they're your family.
Second to last question. What daily habits do you have that make you successful?
Well, I'm an early riser generally, and to be a good early riser, you have to get to sleep early. So the goal should not be to wake up early. The goal should be get to sleep early. And I try to get my workout in every day. I'm 61. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I started late in life. A lot of my buddies are grandfathers already. But
you and me exactly the same, by the way. I have the exact same situation going on here. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do they tuck you into bed at night? Does your 15-year-old tuck you into bed at night? Mine does. I'm always in bed before him, but I'm up 4 hours before he is in the morning as well.
There you go. Yeah, but I love getting to the gym, stay in shape. I think that's important. So I think that, and then, as you know, in the real estate business, every day is very, very different. But, waking up early and getting to the gym are 2 things that are important to me.
Okay, last question. So we are here now, March 2024. It's a challenging time for a lot of people. The markets have turned. There's a lot of, especially in office, lots of devastation, and especially in New York City. So maybe not quite the same as the global financial crisis or the dot-com era, but a lot of people are really having a hard time. Based on your experience and what you've seen of multiple cycles and the way you've described how you've kind of grabbed the bull by the horns, if you like, at least I interpret it, like take risks. I'm not wanting to put words into your mouth, but I guess I am teeing up this. What advice would you give to somebody today who is, facing a tough time because of the market turn?
Right. Well, you're absolutely right, and there are challenging times. Most markets, I unfortunately I only know the New York market, but from what I'm hearing from my friends around the country and around the world, there are tough times and challenges all over. I think the thing to keep in mind is that real estate markets always have been, are, and always will be cyclical. And the market is definitely going to come back. Keep doing the basic fundamental things that you have to do and doing them over and over and over again. I've said, the successful people in real estate brokerage, the three top characteristics I see in those folks: number one, they're an expert at something. Number two, they have passion for the business, and the passion will help you get through these tough times. And number three, they're very, very disciplined. And a lot of what we do in commercial brokerage is not glamorous. But there are things you have to do over and over and over and over again. And eventually it pays off. And I'll give you an anecdote on the Stonecutter's Creed. Stonecutter always says, pound the rock, pound the rock. So the stonecutter sitting in front of a big rock has his hammer, and boom, pounding away at the rock. 99 blows, nothing has happened. The rock's still sitting there. Stonecutter takes that hammer, 100th blow, boom, rock splits in half. Casual observer will say, wow, that 100th one, he must have hit it a little harder. We must have hit it at a different angle. He must have done something different. And the stonecutter is sitting there saying, no, it's the 99 that came before it that made that 100th one go. In the same way, now is the time. Keep making your calls. Keep sending your email blasts. Keep going to networking. Keep doing all these things that accumulate and will have a compound impact on things when things do get better. And maybe if transaction volume is a little slow, maybe take the time to make that special capabilities brochure you were thinking about doing. Take time to write one-page case studies on the transactions that you've done that you can use in the marketing pitch later on when things. Set yourself up to take advantage of that return of the great market when it does come back, because I guarantee you it will come back. I don't know when, but I guarantee you it will, because it always has.
Bob Knakal, foremost investment sales professional in New York City. Thank you so very much for joining me on the podcast.
Adam, so great to be with you. This is really enjoyable.
Well, that was Bob Knakal, who is probably one of the most successful investment sales professionals in New York City, and a real pleasure to meet and to have hosted on the show today. Bob, really, thank you so much. As you say, social media is really an incredible thing, isn't it? That you can meet somebody remotely and on Zoom and on social media, you can get to know them. And I've come to, we would never have met. So it's just impossible, really, for us to have connected. But it was a real pleasure. The pleasure really was all mine today. And I know it was a pleasure for our viewers today. Thank you so much, viewers, for joining us. And if you want to know more about Bob, be sure to go to the podcast page at gowercrowd.com. I'll put all kinds of links there. You can find him. And of course, you can link up with him on LinkedIn. I'll include his LinkedIn profile as well. And while you're there, do be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. It's totally free. It goes out once a week. We cover everything that's going on in the commercial real estate syndication and crowdfunding world. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks so much, everybody, again, for joining me. Until next time, this is Adam Gower signing off.